or fast forward to last year, we completed about 30 assignment deals. And then we picked up 4 multifamily, smaller stuff, duplexes. So we were sitting about 10 units. And we liked the growth. We liked what we were learning, but we wanted more. We wanted more in terms of bigger buildings, more units, right?
Hey everyone, we have Jeff and John Ortiz on the show today. Thanks guys for joining us. Just to give you guys a quick introduction, definitely a great story. 2 brothers migrated from Colombia when they were young boys with their single mom. Definitely had some serious motivation to do something awesome with their lives. And in 2020, they both left their corporate careers to pursue real estate. They did what I think is amazing, and they hired a coach, which is definitely evident in the propelled success that they've had. So since then, done a various number of strategies, started out with wholesaling, low barrier to entry, perfect way to get into the real estate market, and then progressed into small multifamily. And now they're actually, dove straight into the big leagues, doing some syndication work in the United States, primarily focusing in North and South Carolina. Also part of the Wealth Genius network. And I know that Jeff is doing some coaching work, especially as it relates to how Canadians can invest in the United States. So, without further ado, I'll let them tell you more about their story. But here are Jeff and John.
Yeah, thank you guys for having us. We really appreciate it. I'm Jefferson and my brother and partner, John Ortiz. We've been listening to your podcast for quite a bit. So it's nice to be here and share a story and hopefully provide value. Yeah, so I'll kind of go back to originally, we're from Colombia. We immigrated to Canada when we were 8 or 10 years old. And then, grew up with a single mom, not a whole lot of money. We always wanted to make a difference and, create wealth and create money in a sense. And then I became an insurance broker once I graduated from high school. And then my brother went into the logistics side of things. So he became, what was the description?
Logistics
director. And then we were caught in the rat race, working the 9 to 5, having no time, just kind of going through the motion, I would say. And then during that time, I became a father. At a young age, I was 21 when I became a father. And that really changed my perspective on what I wanted to do, what I wanted to leave as a legacy for my family and for the next generation. That led us to getting a coach, or that led us to wholesale, pretty much learning about wholesaling, learning about what it is. We started in the U.S. actually, and we locked up a property in Alabama, which I had no idea what Alabama or anything about it. We couldn't assign it because we didn't know enough about the market or how to find a buyer. But that ended up happening. And then we decided, okay, let's do this the right way and let's hire a coach. We hired a coach in December of 2020. We didn't have the money at the time, but we got it through line of credits and credit cards, however we could. So that was about $15,000. That really led us to open up our minds and our paths to wholesaling, specifically wholesaling in Canada. So fast forward to last year, we completed about 30 assignment deals. And then we picked up 4 multifamily, smaller stuff, duplexes. So we were sitting about 10 units. And we liked the growth. We liked what we were learning, but we wanted more. We wanted more in terms of bigger buildings, more units, right? As you know, it's easier to finance and easier to put together than it is a smaller thing. And that's when we joined Wealth Genius with Alfonso Quadra, who has about 600 units across Canada. And really fell in love with the model of, moving the NOI, cap rates, how they're valued is much more like a business than it is emotional with comparables and whatnot. And that led us to really start underwriting deals, finding deals. We started in Saskatchewan. We didn't like what we found in terms of the economics out there. There's a lot of native gangs related towns. We looked at Alberta. We didn't like the economy. If you look over the last 10 years, it goes up and then it goes right back down depending on the oil. And then that led us to the States, right? Because we're like, well, if we're looking that far, I'm located in Niagara region. My brother's located in Hamilton. So we found that the distance was the same. The only difference was the border. That was the only difference, really, the border. My wife has about 7 uncles in Charlotte. So I've been there a bunch of times. And then I went there in May and I'm like, man, this is a great market. There's so much inventory. There's so much development happening. There's just a lot happening. And then we started studying the U.S., joined a mastermind in the U.S. And then And then now we're doing syndications in the U.S. We became general partners on 137 units in South Carolina. And now we're just looking to keep growing that business and keep bringing on Canadian investors to participate into future projects. I think that's pretty much where we are right now. Yeah, in a nutshell.
Nice. That's amazing. I mean, in such a short period of time, you guys have done so much. So that's amazing. What would you say is one or two things that propelled that thinking from, in such a short period of time? You guys did wholesaling, a bunch of deals, and now you're into multifamily syndications. What do you think it was that kind of made you grow so quickly?
I'll kind of take that away and you can touch on that. So what I would personally say is really two things. Always being in the uncomfort zone, like never being comfortable. And every time you get comfortable, like find a way to get more uncomfortable and keep growing. And then as well as mentorship. I mean, that's by far the most important part, right? You don't know what you don't know. And what we found is once we started surrounding ourselves with people that were where we wanted to be, then your mindset just starts expanding, right? And, when we were in the room with Wealth Genius and everybody's doing 30, 40, 50 units, that becomes your new normal. Right. And now you don't want to look at a duplex. You don't want to look at a triplex because your mind has expanded. Right. So I think that's probably what I would say is just always being uncomfortable in the uncomfortable zone, as well as, mentorship. Like you're literally paying for somebody's time who's already been there, as opposed to us going through the trial and errors. That's what I would say. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, no, he's right. It definitely leveraging relationships. The people around you have a huge influence on you. And the more you're around people that are successful, the more you start looking at things differently, different markets, different growth. And, the educational piece is huge, right? So learning how to talk to brokers, understanding the market, underwriting, how to build relationships with the sellers and the brokers, and, all that you're not going to be able to learn on your own. So definitely the mentorship program and just leveraging relationships definitely helps you along the way, and just seeing how you can grow every week. What's next? How can we get bigger? How can we get better? And it's a long journey, but definitely still a long more to go.
What would you say was one of the trigger points that I know you mentioned that your son was born, but were you reading books at a time about real estate? Like what made you pick real estate versus something else?
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting enough. It was, as many people, rich dad, poor dad. Like that was really the mind shift. I mean, as soon as because I always found myself to be different than most people in terms of the circle around me, and I was never satisfied, right? I was always looking for more. And then when we read that book, we're like, this makes sense. Like this is exactly what the world is, right? Like the taxes, right? The employee mentality, the business mentality, that really opened up our mind to. I'll be honest with you. Growing up, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a real estate investor. Like I didn't know that was a path. I didn't know that was a path. The way most people think, and I'm sure you guys may relate, is if you want to make more money, you got to go to school. You got to keep going back to school. And we found that was not the case, right? You needed to actually change your perspective, change your mindset from an employee to a business to an investor. And that really was, I think, the changing moment for us. That one, Think and Grow Rich. Like the main books that I think most
Stefan
Aarnio, Money People Deal. Yeah. That was a big one.
I think that was probably the first one I was before we even knew anything about real estate, because once you get into that community and just that world, there's so much going on. It's a whole community. There's so much to learn. And I remember even before we knew anything about real estate, I was scrolling through Facebook and one of the ads from Stefan Aarnio came on to purchase the book. And I ended up getting the book within a week, and I was reading it and I was like, what is a deal? What is he talking about when I was reading the book, right? So that's kind of how we started learning and just kind of getting our feet wet and understanding what real estate investment really was and how you can create wealth. And, there's great things along the way, and we've been enjoying it really so far. Yeah.
It's so amazing that you guys are both two brothers on the same page. Like, was it always like that you guys both were motivated and always kind of wanted to be entrepreneurs?
Yeah, or did one kind of convince the other?
No, that's a great point. So I'll just kind of go back just a little bit. So when we were in high school, we actually used to play competitive basketball. That was actually our thing. We used to play very competitive basketball. So I would say that actually taught us a lot of good values. Leadership, teamwork, hard work, right? How to separate yourself from the competition. A couple of actually our team members or the people that we play with are actually in the NBA. One of them, Shea, he plays for Oklahoma. He's in the NBA. And so I think that was one thing, but no, I actually started with the real estate with the whole idea of wholesaling. I told John, I'm like, man, we have to get into this. This is the path. This is how we can create wealth. This is how we can become wealthy. And in the beginning, he didn't really understand it. But then once we started doing some deals and money started coming in and he started to familiarize himself with the market and the industry, then it was like, this is what we want to do. This is what we're going to be doing. And that's it. Like there's no turning back in a way, right?
No, he's at the beginning, obviously I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, I don't know about all this. Right. And then, once he did his first deal, I supported him and kind of jumped on the team and we did all the deals together from on there, me helping him with, showings, walkthroughs, lawyer communications, deposits, and, kind of just the backbone marketing and other stuff. I'm actually a mortgage broker as well. So I do that side of the business right now and financing our own deals. And it's been great so far. But yeah, definitely him. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's great. And, there's something that's very apparent. Like the first time I talked to you, Jeff, and I find this with a lot of entrepreneurs that I meet in that they're extremely hungry for knowledge. Like, it's weird to me. Like sometimes we'll go to dinner parties or we'll go meet new people. And if I tell them a little bit about myself, they don't really ask me any more questions. But when I meet people or when we meet people, we always want to know more because there's this innate curiosity. And I got that from you the first time you talked to me. So like, what about this? Like, what do you do with this? Like, tell me more about this. Like, I want to learn. I want to know. I want to grow. Right. And I think that hunger is just so important because you don't know what you don't know. And every single person you meet, no matter what walk of life they come from, there's always something to learn. And that knowledge is just how you build yourself up and how you grow as an entrepreneur and as a human as well. Right. And I think that's wonderful because it sounds to me like that was a lot of what you guys did. It was just like gathering information. Like you saw an ad, I want this book. I want to read this. You meet somebody. It's like, hey, tell me more, teach me. I want to join your network. I want to join your wealth genius. I want to do this. I want to do this so that I can continue to grow. So I think that's wonderful. I mean, I think more young people need to have more of that hunger and that want to learn and grow. And like I said, for us, it's always puzzling. I'm like, no, he didn't. Like I told him a little bit, but nobody really asks me very much.
I would say, most people are in their comfort zone, right? They are in their own bubble with their jobs and many of them don't think about anything else besides their day-to-day, right? And this kind of reminds me of a quote one of my mentors in the past had said, fat dog don't hunt.
I like that. Fine. It's honestly mind-blowing that especially now being in the industry and being on the other side of the fence and understanding that 80 or 90% of the people just go through the motion. They just go to work, they come home, they watch TV, they spend a little bit of time with family, and then this repeat over and over. And when I got myself into that routine, I was like, man, this is not like you're not fulfilled. You're like just going through the motion every day. Like you don't have a purpose, right? So you're waking up every day and you're just going through the motion, making somebody else richer, making somebody else's business better, right? So even same thing with us, even with our family and friends, right? When we first started, nobody believed wholesaling. They're like, you must be doing something illegal. You need a license, right? And I'm like telling them like, no, there's literally investors doing this all over the place. And now it's kind of like a whole circle. Now they're like, how can we get involved? What can we do to do a deal or whatever, right? So it's I think it's definitely the mindset for sure.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So, maybe tell us a little bit about, so like now you're in wholesaling, you guys are doing some deals, you're gaining some traction, making 30 deals is an amazing track record. So what sort of pivoted the focus from that into like now going into purchasing buy and holds and then even like, making your way into the multifamily space?
Yeah, I can take this one. So basically, when we were doing the wholesale, we really enjoyed it, and we liked it because it's quick money. But then we were seeing what some of our partners were doing in terms of we would we would make maybe 15, 20K. They're in the back end flipping and making 200K. They're making, doing a full burp plus 100K plus 200K. And as much as we were happy for them, we were just like, maybe we're on the wrong side of the business, right? And that's when we started purchasing our own properties, and we started bringing JVs to like bring the deposit, because we were good at finding deals. We found that we were good at finding deals and negotiating deals. But then we're like, well, let's just leverage other people that have the capital. They don't have the time to find the deals. And so we started doing some JVs. And then I think for myself, and I think John as well, we always wanted to get into the apartment. I always fell in love with apartments. I always loved like just the whole aspect of it. But like many people, I had those limited beliefs that, you need a lot of money, right? You needed to get 100 single families to then get a building or something along those lines. And then, when we joined the Wealth Genius and we understood that it's all about leverage, and it's like, what can you bring to the table? What value can you bring to the team per se, right? And understanding that there's so much people with capital that don't know where to put it, especially with the way things are right now, right? Inflation is all-time high. People have all this money sitting in the bank, just literally doing nothing, losing money every single day that it goes by. And we understood that we're actually helping fulfill a need, right? Which is making the capital work and creating wealth for ourselves and for them, right? So that was a big turning point with us. It was like, we thought we needed to have all the money, have all the capital, and is really not like that, especially in the syndication space. It really is a team sport, right? One person might find a deal, the other person might underwrite the deal, or that they could be the same person, right? You have another person that's boots on the ground doing the asset management once the deal closes. You have somebody else who raises capital and does asset management. So there's all these moving pieces. It's a whole team sport, and we had to kind of figure it out. Like, okay, this is a team sport. What can we bring to the table? What's our value proposition in this business like this? And that was a big mind shift for us, I think. You want to?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The wholesaling run was great, and we still do it from time to time on specific deals where it makes sense. And after doing a couple wholesale deals, we kind of bought our own properties and went through the whole BERT method, structured some JV deals, and kind of learned that side of the business. And yeah, we jumped right after to multifamily with Alfonso and Wealth Genius, and that was a great learning experience, great network team, great masterminds. And now we're in the apartment syndication. Like you say, it is truly a team sport, and it's so much more bigger than it is down here. Like the underwriting that you do in the States compared to underwriting, a 20, 30 unit building here, everything is different. They use different lingos. Every market is completely different than, if you're crossing the border or whatnot. So yeah, no, I think that's kind of how we ended up in the syndication aspect. Yeah.
Actually, that was going to be my next question, is what made you switch your focus from, and maybe tell us like some of the big differences between what Canadian multifamily or what you're seeing in your area versus the U.S. market.
Of course. No, that's a great question. So definitely, a big turning piece for myself and John was we still have a tenant in Fort Erie and one of our duplexes, and she, I didn't do the proper due diligence when it came to bringing her on board in terms of doing the background check, all that stuff. And she's been going almost 8 months without paying rent, right? And that was a big turning point, because I'm like, okay, this is just one tenant. I understand like all investors go through this, right? But it's like, why would I want to keep investing in a place that looks at me as the landlord as the enemy, right? That was a big one, right? It's like, if we're buying a large multifamily property and we have to give cash for keys or find some sort of strategy, then we're not going to be able to scale as faster, because we're spending so much time just getting tenants to leave, right? They're paying so low, so that you might not be able to get them out, right? You might offer them $30,000. They're like, no, I'm not leaving. This is my house, and I'm gonna die here, pretty much, right? So that was a big one. The landlord rules that we have in Ontario and Canada are just brutal. The second thing, then we started looking at Alberta, Saskatchewan, and they're more landlord friendly, but the economies that they have, it's like the vacancy rate is like 11%, 12% in some places, right? We're thinking, okay, we turn around the units, but now we don't have anybody to rent it to. So what's the point of going through all that and then having nobody to rent it to? We're in the States, especially the markets that we're looking into, which is Winston-Salem, Raleigh, Greensboro, Fayetteville. These markets, like we study the markets and we really got to know what's going on in the market. Who are the major employers? What are the Fortune 500 companies that are moving there? And you start to see this migration, the shift of like big migration happening So that was a big one too, right? Like we have people that we can actually rent it to once we turn it around. There's a demand, right? There's a job, and then there's demand for people. So there's going to be more migration happening. So that was another one. And then just the scalability and some of the things that you can do in the States, like, the accelerated depreciation, right? The 1031 exchange, like all those factors. I mean, it just seems to be in your favor as a landlord, right? Whereas in Canada, I almost feel like they're going backwards, right? Like even short-term rentals, they don't, you need a license, right? They're always putting roadblocks for you to say like, don't keep growing. Like, you're almost trying to cap you at a certain point. So that was a big one. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is the lenders. I mean, in Canada, we have the major banks, we have a couple credit unions, and then we have private lenders. In the States, they have hundreds of lenders. I mean, there's so many lenders. There's hundreds of them. So that's another aspect of it that I think kind of made us shift our perspective.
Yeah.
And then the weather, right? Like the snow,
the weather.
the snow, like honestly, the snow and the cold really deteriorates your buildings, right? And now you have to change the roof faster. Now you have to change the windows faster because it deteriorates a lot quicker than it is in South or North Carolina or some of these South markets.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah. And I also feel like here, unfortunately, like everybody's just super bullish on the market, and which is driving all of the decisions. And I mean, don't get me wrong, like we've had a great run here because we bought like in the early, 2000s, like we were buying in 2010, 2012, but like now it's like really like you're still bullish on this market and you're buying at a price per unit. I mean, that doesn't make any fundamental sense. And exactly what you said with regards to execution of a business plan, because ultimately when you're buying large multifamily, it is a business. And when you have all of these government political roadblocks in place, you can't execute your business plan. So in turn, how can you be answerable to your investors, right?
Exactly.
So you're saying to them like, okay, in order to get this building, from this cap to this cap, I need to turn around X number of units. I need to increase the rents by this much. Well, how are you going to do that? Okay, well, I'm going to vacate, and I'm going to do this. But then all of a sudden, when it comes down to you're in the trenches, like you said, somebody turns around and says, this is my forever home. I'm going to die here, which by the way, is happening to us right now.
Yeah.
It's extremely likely. And not only that, the cash for keys budget can just literally turn into something astronomical all of a sudden, right?
And you haven't even tapped into, like, you haven't even started renovations and you're already spending 20, 30,000. And it's just like, if you do it on a scale of, like, if you're doing 100 units, I mean, that can add up really, really fast.
100%.
Right?
So 100%. And not only that, the time cost, right? The time cost of having units that were intended to be turned around, which now can't be turned around for, now a year later or two years later, while you're still waiting for your, your tenant turnaround. So yes, I mean, there's, and again, like you said, collections, right? All of a sudden you have a certain percentage of tenants who stop paying. Economic fundamentals in the city change because right now, we say the world's going through a recession. Now what? All of a sudden you have tenants who are not paying, who are staying in place for 8 months, 1 year until they get a supposed court date. Like it's not very predictable and when you have other people's money, all of a sudden, that predictability needs to be rock solid.
That honestly was the biggest one, right? Like we started looking at Alberta, we had all these buildings, like, good, cash on cash made sense, all this stuff, right? But then we're like, it's like you said, we're dealing with other people's money. We want to be really responsible and we want to make sure we can deliver on what we're telling them we can do, right?
Your reputation is everything.
Two things that I wanted to add. One of them was that I think what happens in the States that's different than Canada is that every state is so different, right? You have Texas, you have Florida, you have New York, everywhere is so different, right? So you actually have a migration happening. For instance, right now, as you guys know, New York, California, all these people are migrating to the South, right? Whereas in Canada, we don't have that leverage because everybody wants to live in Ontario. You don't have a big migration of hundreds of thousands of people that are moving from Ontario to Saskatchewan. Like that doesn't happen, or to Alberta, or to Nova Scotia or Nunavut. Like that doesn't happen. So therefore the migration really only happens in Ontario. Ontario has all this population, but not enough inventory. Whereas in the States, I find that because everywhere's so different, you're like, let's say you live in Denver and you're like, you know what, I'm tired of this. I want to go to a hot place. You go to Miami, you go to Florida. It's almost like a different country, I would say.
Yeah,
it is.
And
that's a really good point. Yeah.
And the one thing I wanted to say is that when we are underwriting deals here, I mean, I'm sure you guys seen it too, it's so hard to get any returns. Like more often than not, you're actually negative cash flow. And it's just like, why would we want to buy a building or business that is negative? It's actually negative, right? It doesn't make any sense. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly the same reasons that you mentioned is why we decided to look in the U.S. market as well. We actually also went to the same process. We were looking at Alberta. We thought that maybe we could make Alberta work, and some people can, but we just thought, why not the U.S. Right? It's a yeah, I know you're crossing the border, so there's different tax consequences, and getting investors on board to invest across the border is a little bit of a challenge. However, you know what? As in, if I'm seeing this business from a long-term perspective, 5-10 years, I know that if this is the place to be, right? The U.S. is the place to be. You've got much more landlord-friendly laws. General business friendly environment. You got as you mentioned, much better financing options. You got the interest only loans that can drastically boost your cash on cash returns, right? So, and then you have a predictable way to execute your business plan, right?
And most importantly, you have inventory to buy.
Yes.
Right. So that I think that people need to talk about this, because, when you're a real estate investor, I know it's not all about like how many doors and accumulating doors, but it's also about growth, right? So as you continue to grow, like for us, we were at a point where we actually had cash to invest in our next deals, and we couldn't find anything to buy. That's not a good place to be. You should not ever be limited in your growth because there's actually nothing to buy in the market that you're in. And I'm not talking about like we didn't like the properties, like we couldn't even find anything, and so that doesn't make any logical sense as being the reason that you're not continuing to move forward. And we realize that we're like, this is silly. Like we're just stagnant right now because there's nothing. So we have to find a place where there's always an abundance of opportunity. And because of all of this, like the 1031 exchanges and everything, people are more likely to transact in the US. Over here, you find that a lot of the buildings are generationally held because A, they don't want to trigger tax implications, and B, where are they going to put the money?
Yes.
Right? Over there, it's like, okay, I'm going to sell my 20 unit. I've made good appreciation on it. I've improved it. I've increased the value. Now I'm going to go and flip that over and buy a 50 unit. And I'm going to do the same thing. And then I'm going to, continue to sort of grow myself. Everybody's in that same growth mindset because it's favorable to do so.
I agree. No, I agree 100%. And the thing about it that I find in the States is that the sellers that are selling their building, like you said, they made a good profit, but they'll leave a little bit of, meat on the bone for the next
100%.
person that's buying it, right? Whereas here, they're like, hey, if you don't give me what I'm asking for, I have five other people, or I have five other people that they won't pay. I have buyers from Toronto. That's what we always get. I got buyers from Toronto. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Who are in no way concerned about the cap.
Yeah. Cap rate.
Like they just want to park their money is what it seems like, right? And they're not actually concerned about the returns, or so that's the vibe I get.
And kind of like what Jose said, I agree with you 100%, is that over there, you can execute your business plan. Like, hey, we got all these leases coming up for renewal on this month. We're going to be able to turn around those units because you know that when the renewal comes up, you let tenants know, hey, listen, I'm going to be renovating it. So you can execute your plan. You can budget accordingly. You can underwrite accordingly. Whereas in Canada, it's very, very hard. It's very like, it's a 50-50 chance. Hey, listen, you got to tell your investor, hey, there's a 50% chance that we might be able to get them out, but there's a 50% chance that we might not be able to. And in that case, we're going to be negative cash flow. It's like, how do you sell that? It's hard. You know what I mean? It's hard to sell that.
100%.
Yeah. 100%.
And what I found in the States as well is the larger the building, you have enough attraction on the cash flow perspective to fulfill your investors while you're still stabilizing and optimizing the building.
Exactly.
Here in Canada, it's hard to find something like that.
Yeah, 100%. I find that in the US, things move at a much faster pace. Like for example, lending environment, it will change as the market moves, right? They interest only loans didn't exist not too long ago, right? Like everybody's now going on to bridge debt, interest only, but 5 years ago it wasn't as prominent, right? Most people were going with the agency loans, but it adapted because the market needed it, right? And they Wall Street will figure out a way to make it work, right? It's just because that's where they need to deploy capital as well, right?
Yeah, the first time, like when Jose started going down to the US a few years ago, he would come back and he would always be like, yeah, it's the wild, wild west. Like he would always call it the wild, wild west. Like everything goes down there. Like we just like they'll make it happen. Somebody will come in and somebody will dump capital or somebody will figure out a way, but like everything will happen. Like there's always a way down there. It's almost like the rules are bendable.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately,
favorable.
capitalism is what drives growth, right? That's what it is, and unfortunately, Ontario is becoming too much of a socialist. But we won't go.
I know. I feel like we're doing a rant on Ontario right now. Canada's a great place to live, and like we enjoy living here too. But honestly, like the reality is the reality, right? Like if you're in real estate and you're really wanting to grow, especially in these spaces, like there is just not enough opportunity here, and our immigration is just becoming heavier and heavier. So the competition is becoming only more fierce.
Yeah. And like one thing, last thing before we wrap up the Ontario part, but one thing that I wanted to mention is that even what we found is that I was talking to an investor from Alberta or Saskatchewan, and he was telling me that they're struggling to get doctors to live in that city because most of them will come in for a month or two and then they'll migrate to Ontario, right? So even from that perspective, we were just like, what would we, if doctors don't even want to live there, what would we want to invest into those cities or into those places, right? So yeah, it's definitely a big of a challenge, but yeah, we'll wrap up that for Ontario.
So let's switch gears into, I wanted to get into, what are some of your mid to long-term goals? What you want to get to?
Of course, that's a great question. So we originally kind of wrote it down, as a company, and everybody that we bring on board, employees in the future, we want them to have the same vision and the same values that we have. And our goal in the next like 5 to 6 years is to get to 4,000 units under management. And I know a lot of people may say, well, why 4,000 units? There's so many or whatever, right? And for us, and that's something my mentor Alfonso said, it's not so much the units, but it's the person that you become getting to those units, right? Is the people that we will become as leaders, as men, as father, as brothers, right? Is the people that will become getting to those units. And then a 10-year or even 15-year-old goal that we have is to have $1 billion under management. And again, same thing. It's not so much the number, but it's the person that will become along the journey. And for us, being immigrants from Colombia and being able to, do something like that would be very meaningful to us and to our community and the people that, surround us and our kids and next generation.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, he's right on. It's, I think, mostly just achieving our goals, leaving a legacy behind to his kids and our family, and doing something that we love. We didn't really enjoy our corporate job, but real estate is something that we wake up and we enjoy doing, and yeah, we just want to keep on pushing, moving forward.
Yeah, and definitely what I was going to say is that those goals, if you don't have a place to actually, like, you can't achieve that goal in Canada. I mean, it's very unrealistic. Yeah. But in the US, like you can probably 10 people that has already achieved it, right? So definitely you're on the right track in the right market to achieve that.
Yeah, we'll have you on again, and you can tell us about maybe in 2 years already having had half that success. I'm certain you guys are going to get there. So,
no. Yeah, and exactly like Jose said, even like one of my mentors, Alfonso, right? He has 600 units in Canada, right? And he's done this for 20 years, right? And I asked him, like, how come you haven't gone into the US? And he said that, like, back when he was buying, it was a good time to buy and numbers made sense and everything. But like the amount of work that he's put into that, if he would have done that in the States, he would be at like 5,000 or 6,000 units. Yeah. And kind of like what Jose said, we've actually, people in our network and our groups that were in the States, they have acquired that at 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 units. And it's almost like having those conversations with them and seeing what do they do? What can we adjust? What can we, you know what I mean? Like just kind of learning from them and being in a room where there's people that have done it, it makes it so much more achievable and it makes it more not as uncommon, I would say.
No, yeah, for sure. Leveraging those relationships.
Bringing value to them.
It's huge, and it's something that can help you grow along the way.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that what you said about who you become, because I've been saying that to myself so many times. It's not about the goal, because the goal is always changing, right? You get to the goal and then you have to have another goal. And people ask us that all the time too. It's like, what for? Right. And, it's also like, I posted this the other day, but like I read about, this quote about Ed Milet, and, it was so timely, especially with kids, and how, the greatest, what does he use? The greatest disservice or the greatest injustice you give your kids is not showing them a parent who is striving to be their very best and achieve their biggest goals. Like that is the biggest disservice you do to your kids as parents, and even to yourself. It's not about anyone else or achieving a number or achieving a dollar. It's about being the very best version of yourself and growing to be the very best you, and doing the most service you can in this world while you're here. Right. So I think I think a lot of entrepreneurs will resonate with that. And entrepreneurship gives you the platform to do that. Because in the employment world, it's not that being an employee is bad, but oftentimes, again, just like we're talking about how Ontario is limiting you, like that's the same exact analogy in the workplace, right? You're limited by external factors. Even if you have this brilliant idea you want to implement, or if there's, this position of leadership that you want to achieve, there's always external things outside of yourself that are often navigating that for you.
Yes. And one thing that I wanted to just quickly wrap up or like touch on is that one of our mentors, Rod Cleve, we were at as mastermind a month ago. And one thing that was really meaningful to us that we never even thought about is that a lot of these, very successful people give back in bunches. Like they give back to charity, they give back to communities, they give back to the military, so it's a lot, it's as you're making and as you're doing, you're also giving back. One thing that he says that I really enjoy his quote is that you have two hands. One to lift yourself up and one to lift somebody with you, right? And I really like that quote because I resonate with that.
Yeah, I know you guys are definitely wise beyond your years. So it's been such a great time talking to you guys. Before we end off, I think you already gave us a quote, but we always ask our guests, is there sort of a quote that you'd like to share that resonates with you guys, how you live or how you conduct your business that,
That's a good question. Just before we wrap it up, I did want to mention that obviously we are offering, mentorship for Canadians that want to invest in the U.S. with Wealth Genius.
Right, through Wealth Genius. Yeah, touch on that for us real quick.
Yeah. So it basically just came up the opportunity. They have this program in Canada, but now they're expanding to the U.S. and they brought it to our attention. Hey, would you like to coach people? And we already have an existing course where we teach people how to find off-market deals because we had so much people asking us if we mentor them, and we created a course. And people that bought it. They've been closing deals, wholesaling deals. So we've created that. We really enjoyed giving back and really giving back to the community, giving back to the people. And then we got this other opportunity to mentor people to invest in the U.S., which we're, as from this conversation that we had, you can tell we were really passionate about investing in the U.S. And so we're bringing on investors and teaching them how to invest, what are things to look out for, how to have your investment criteria, and so on. So we're just happy to provide value.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's amazing. And so what's the best way for people to get a hold of you and some of your courses and things like that?
Yeah, of course. So you can visit we're pretty active on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook, Jefferson Ortiz, John Ortiz. Our Instagram, which I think it'll be on the link. Yeah. So it'll be in the description there. And you can message us on Instagram, LinkedIn. We're also LinkedIn, Jefferson Ortiz, John Ortiz. Pretty much anywhere. We're pretty active on social media, so we'd be happy to respond to anything or hop on a call with anybody who has any questions. We're always there to provide value.
And any website?
Well, we do have our personal website, which is O Property Solutions. That's right. opropertysolutions.com. We are doing some adjustments to it because we had it, mainly for Canada, and now we're adjusting it to the US, to investors and so on. So that'll be up and running hopefully in the next couple of weeks, like fully where we need it to go. But you can hit us up on social media platforms, and we really want to. So the quote that you guys mentioned about, I would probably I don't know if you want to have any that you can think of. Yeah. I would say that what Rod Cleve says, you have two hands, one to lift yourself and one to lift somebody with you. I think that really resonates with us, especially, being immigrants to Canada, being able to be here. We just really want to provide value to people, right? And just show them that there's other ways than 9 to 5. 9 to 5 is not the whole life. You're not being fulfilled most of the time. But
I think mine would be getting 1% better each day. Sometimes we're so overwhelmed with information and data that's all over the place just try to focus on one thing and just try to get better at it. It's every day, chip it one piece at a time, and eventually you'll get to where you want to be if you stay focused and consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's
amazing.
great, guys. Yeah. So,
Thanks a lot for
Yeah.
joining us on our show. We really appreciate sharing your journey and your wisdom along the way.
No, thank you guys for having us. We really appreciate it. Like I said, I know we chatted before briefly on with your spouse there on Zoom, and we really connected. We really had some good vibes. So we appreciate you guys having us. We love what you guys are doing in the community, and definitely would be happy to be back later on.
Yeah,
Okay,
totally. It's been a
amazing.
pleasure,
Thanks,
guys.
guys.
Really appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely.
Take care, guys.
Bye.